you can't really talk about the sort of policing that now exists and the surveillance that exists over girls of color's bodies if you don't understand the historical and very intentional policy framework that was put in place in order to exact that control. And a lot of the, if you look at sort of the initial girls' schools in the 1800s that were created, they were created for the destitute, the dependent, and the delinquent. And if you look at what that means and who's actually in the juvenile justice system now, it is girls who come from working class or impoverished backgrounds. It is girls of color, predominantly, because they come from those communities when Clara talks about confluence. It is girls in the child welfare system, so dependency systems, right? And delinquency systems. So if you think about, that's the language that was being used in the 1800s, and that's the language that continues to be used now, then it's hard to extricate them as two different things. But instead, a very, I think, intentional project to continue to regulate and control women's bodies. I was speaking to a woman who was telling me that, a survivor, an Indigenous survivor, who told me that in Cheyenne, there is no word for prostitution or quote unquote prostitute, that actually that was a word that colonization brought. And that was a system that colonization brought. And so I think, like to Cara's point, you can't talk about this without talking about enslavement through the transatlantic slave trade and the fancy girl trade that existed. And you can't talk about where we're at without understanding the way that colonization continues to play out in our communities.